Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to talk about new and used. Hey David, I want to pick up a new camera and some lenses now that I've kind of gotten used to using the one I borrowed from my grandpa. Should I only buy new gear or is used gear okay? Good question. I have a video I'll link in the description that you can check out that shows how I go through and evaluate a camera, a used camera. There's a bunch of steps you can do to check the camera in the store to make sure everything works. And then there's some film tests as well that you can use to check and make sure that the camera functions well in regards to things you can't just look at with how the camera's working and evaluate on the spot in a store. Let me start talking about lenses. Obviously, buying used cameras is fine. I have never bought a new film camera, not a serious one. I mean, I bought a plastic TLR that you had to assemble at home brand new, and I did buy the Ondu pinhole camera brand new, but that's really it. Everything else I own film-wise is used. Used gear is great. Most people, when they were buying cameras, especially back in the day, took good care of them, as good a care of them as they took of their cars, because there wasn't a huge price difference between the two of them. I mean, there was. You weren't spending the equivalent of $30,000 on a camera, but most cameras cost people 1, 2, 3, 4 months salary to buy. And if you're going to invest 1, 2, 3, 4 months salary, you take pretty good care of it. So used cameras are generally okay to buy. Used cameras typically don't have huge problems, and if they do, buy from a reputable seller that will take it as a return or an exchange if there's an issue. Lenses are really easy to test. So the things you need to know about lenses, you want to make sure that the optics are clean, that the aperture is clean, and that it works properly. You can have a clean aperture that still moves slowly, and that can be an issue. You also want to make sure that the focus is smooth, doesn't sound strange, and that the zoom is smooth. And if it's an autofocus camera lens, you want to make sure that the autofocus drive doesn't sound weird when you rack it back and forth. And you also want to make sure that the autofocus motor works when you hook it up to a camera. If you're buying online, which is the way most of us buy anymore, then just make sure you're buying from somebody who has a good return policy. If you're buying it in a store, you can at least typically check it in the store to make sure that it works if you're going to a good camera shop. So used gear is fine. When you evaluate a lens for the cleanness of the optics, you want to make sure that the aperture is open as far as you can. On FDN lenses from Canon, it only opens up to f5.6, I think. It's a pain to get it all the way open, so you just kind of have to hold it a little bit differently in the light to see what I'm about to tell you about. There are some problems with a camera lens that are not an issue. So for instance, cleaning marks on the front element, if they're minor, not really a big deal. You'll maybe get a little bit of flare, so you'll want to make sure you use a lens hood with it, but if you can get 20-30% off your lens, because it's got a handful of light cleaning marks, jump at it. It's a huge cost savings for something that is not, in all probability, going to affect your image quality. If it looks like somebody took sandpaper to the front of the lens, don't buy it. If you have some internal dust inside of your lens, also a single or a half dozen pieces of large dust, not an issue at all. Those could actually just be flaws in the glass, and just with the way lens optics works, large pieces of dust don't really affect your image quality. Now, if you saw 10,000 pieces of small dust, that's a problem. That can affect image quality. If you see a little bit of internal reflection off of some small dust on the inside, it's not a big deal. Basically, you want your optics to look clean. If you could hold them up to your eye and it doesn't look like it's not going to be in focus, but if you can hold it up to your eye and at least the light coming through it looks clean, you're going to be okay. If the rear element has problems, that's significantly worse than if the internal or the front element has problems. That's the last point in the optical path until it hits the film. So rear element issues are worse than front element issues. light cleaning marks on a rear element will have more of an effect than they will on the front element in terms of your finished image quality. Another thing to look for is to make sure that your lens doesn't have fungus. Fungus looks like spider webs or pieces of cotton inside of the lens. It grows, it gets worse over time. You can clean it if you take the lens apart, which you probably don't want to do, but some funguses will actually etch the coatings of the lens and leave the shape of the fungus in the coatings. If it's clean, it's okay. It doesn't have as much of an effect on the camera, but fungus does a pretty good job of ruining a camera lens. The other thing you want to make sure your camera lens doesn't have is something called haze. And haze just looks like cloudiness. If you blew on your glasses lenses or the window if you don't have glasses on, that's kind of what haze looks like. There are other issues, coating separation, which look like a rainbow sheen on the glass. That can be an issue in certain lighting situations, not all. Haze is an issue in every situation because it affects your image quality. So there are some problems that are survivable and some that you want to really avoid. If you have a question what some of these things look like, there's a link in the description to this video that will take you to some of my other videos that show you what some of these lens problems like fungus and haze look like so that you can identify them when you pick up a lens to look at it. Used gear is fine. Buy from a reputable source, someone you trust. If you bought from them before and had a good experience, you'll have another good experience in all likelihood. There are lots and lots of really good places online to buy used gear. B&H, Amazon, Yodobashi, I think, has a used section. Adorama, KEH is an amazing used store. In fact, I think I buy more used gear from KEH than any other single source. So, yes, used gear is fine as long as you know what pitfalls to watch out for and you're buying from a trusted place. Don't just buy a random used lens from a guy on Craigslist who's like, hey, 20 bucks and you can have this thing. That's probably a bad sign.